Today I'm going to do something a little different than I have done before. While I reviewed games today, I'm going to start maybe a new series, depending on how you guys like it. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Today I'll be discussing the very first Fire Emblem game, Fire Emblem, the Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light, which was released in English for the first time ever a couple years ago, and you can't buy it anymore because Nintendo does Nintendo-like things. I've always had a curiosity for this type of game, mostly because I became a big fan of Fire Emblem when I first played Awakening way back in 3DS days. I always wondered what the series originally was like, since, most Americans didn't even play it back in the day. It wasn't until the 2000s that we actually got our first translations. And while Nintendo, like I said, did give us a translation, it was only for a very short amount of time during the 30th anniversary, and you could only buy it digitally, unlike Japan, which had the game on Switch Online. So you know what I did? I played it on the Switch anyway, using the Japanese version and using a Google Translate. It wasn't very pretty, but I got through it. Today I'm going to be explaining the little bit of history behind the game. Well, mostly just the gameplay itself rather than the history. There's not much there. Intelligent Systems worked on Famicom games. They said they're going to make their own game, starting with a game called Famicom Wars. The game Famicom Wars is very similar to Fire Emblem, except taking place in modern warfare using tanks and soldiers, while Fire Emblem, of course, uses medieval weaponry. Both the games have the tactical RPG, and both of them are predecessors to a lot of other tactical RPG games, as they were kind of the first ever, not the first ever, but they were ones that inspired a lot of other ones to come out, and I really love this genre. If you didn't know what tactical RPG is, basically you control an army of players on a battlefield, and you move each of them during a turn. And essentially you have to use one of those units to do certain things like healing and trading items, but as well as actually attacking enemies in the field, which you can only move certain spaces during a turn. And after your turn's done, the enemies, of course, will come at you. It's very interesting. In a way, it's sort of like applying board game rules into a video game, and I find it extremely fun. But the real question is Fire Emblem still a fun game to play? Or was it just very dated? Well, it's both. If you're wanting to get into the Fire Emblem series, I heavily do not recommend you playing this one first, because there's a lot of issues that a lot of games will fix in the future. If you're going to start a Fire Emblem game, I highly recommend starting Fire Emblem Awakening or one of those two games on Switch, since they obviously have a lot better mechanics than this one. Well, the mechanics are pretty simple. The lack of certain elements of the game definitely hindered the original Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and Blade of Light from reaching the heights of the future installments. As I mentioned before, you move your units into a field. However, it's kind of hard to figure out where you actually can move. Unlike in future games which have a grid-like system, here you kind of just have to feel around to see where you can actually move your units. Certain units have special abilities, which we'll get to a little later on the field. The battlefield, of course, can be pretty dangerous, and you gotta keep aware of where your units are, because enemies can also hit you. And unlike future games, you cannot see where the enemies can move in the future turn, so you might have to do a lot of guesswork to figure out, okay, how far away can that enemy hit me? Which is something that isn't a problem in the future Fire Emblem games. Another thing you gotta keep aware of is that you need units to actually go to the houses here, which it will be fine, except it's pretty annoying to actually have to visit every one of these houses every turn, have to worry about, well, as well as worrying about incoming enemies, especially since a lot of them can only be visited by Marth, your main unit. Unlike in future games, this is the only way you can actually trade items and buy more items, is by moving one unit into each individual square, and it can be pretty tedious, especially when you don't know what specific enemy is going to come at you. This game really requires you knowledge of what exactly is on each battlefield, and requires lots of resets, which can make up taking a lot of time to play this one game. The battles in this game are also a lot slower. Movement, as well as the battle scenes, feel like they can take a little longer than they need to be. It can be a little tedious, especially compared to, like I said, future Fire Emblem installments, so you can just assume that pretty much everything is going to be better and smoother in a future Fire Emblem installment than in this game. On the battlefield, you'll find unique tiles. Some of them can only be bypassed by certain elements. There are the plain grass ones, which basically don't really matter to you at all, you just walk through them. There are the forest ones, that can protect you during combat as well as block your movement speed. The little mountains, which are pretty hard to get over for most units. The high mountains, which basically are impassable only to Pegasus riders. And pretty much the castle places as well as shops. The castle ones will heal your unit pretty little bit at a time, which is pretty much the main way you're going to heal your guys, because you have to go to the shops to buy little health potions. Like I said, it's kind of hard to do that for the most part, as well as get the few healers you have on the field. It can be pretty tedious. You better be careful, because if one of your unit dies in the game, which they might likely do if you don't know what you're doing, and it's actually pretty easy in this game, well, they die, they don't come back. Yes, Fire Emblem has Nuzlocke rules. The only unit that cannot die is Marth, because if you die, you get a game over, since, he's the main guy. But don't worry too much, because there's a total of 52 playable units you can have on the battlefield, though only certain ones at a time, but you can get a pretty massive army full of very interesting, colorful characters, all of which unique types. Of these types, we have archers, which can shoot from a distance, from basically a space away, which can be useful as an enemy can't hit you. However, if the enemy gets close to you, they cannot hit at close-up range. There's the rare ballistician, which is, yes, the name they use, which have very long range compared to the archer, but are very slow and can be left out in the open, so they're not very well recommended in this game. There's only 2 of them, so it doesn't really matter anyway. There are bishops, which have the useful ability of healing other allies, as well as using magic book tomes, which are pretty useful as they can be used at range and at close hand, and they're amazing, so these guys are great. Next is the Cavaliers, which there's actually quite a few of them in the game. These are horse riding guys who have a lot of movement spaces. They're actually pretty all-around well average. Not the best in the game, but due to their movement mobility, they're very useful. They use lances and swords, which can be nice to have. There are priests, known as curates in this original game, which only have the ability to use a staff, unlike the previous mentioned bishop, which can use that and the tomes. So these guys are pretty vulnerable, especially since some of them start off with just the move spell, which is not as useful as the healing one. The fighters are axe wielders, who are all-around average guys. They can hit pretty hard in certain enemy types, though, so keep that in mind. There's the Freelancer. These guys are unique as there's only one of them, and they can copy the stats of any of your units, and I believe even enemy units. So yeah, that's kind of useful, but they can't copy the inventory, so that's not as useful. Much like the Freelancers, there's only one general unit in the game. However, they're pretty tanky, having high HP, defense, and attack, with very low speed. Not as bad as Knights, though. The hero class is a glass cannon. Using swords, they are quick and they hit hard, however their defense is bad. So very good at certain areas, not so much in some others, which you'll find later in the game. The Horseman, featured here without being on a horse, he's basically just a cavalier except with a bow. So yeah, that's about it. The Hunter, which is another one-unit class, is basically just like I said, an archer class, except more specialized, more glass cannon-y, but just a little bit. It's only one unit, so it's not really going to be that big a deal. The Knight class is the exact opposite of the glass cannon. These guys are tanks. They have terrible mobility, but high defense, and they're very good at using swords and lances to get good attack movements. But like I said, they have bad mobility, and sometimes they don't always hit their opponent. But they do hit hard. The Lord unit is only used by one character, your main guy, Marth, who you'll probably recognize as he's the main kind of character of the Fire Emblem franchise. Though he's not in every Fire Emblem game. He appears in the majority, including the original one here. And we're just going to talk about his class, which is Lord. And since he's the only class of this unit of the class, he is pretty good. His Lords are basically kind of like beefed up glass cannons that grow exponentially over time, especially since he gets the exclusive Falchion sword, which is important to the plot later, which actually lets him heal in between turns, which is amazing. This guy is pretty useful. However, the enemies know this, and they will always attack him. And like I said, if he dies, it's game over for you. The Mage class is just a bishop, but less experienced. In fact, 2 of them can actually move up to the bishop state, so yeah, they can only use tomes, which are very useful. However, these guys are pretty frail, so keep that in mind. But like I said, the tomes are a very useful ability to have, so it's very useful to have these guys out in the battlefield. The next unit is one of the most unique ones, the Manakete, I believe is how you say it. There's only 2 of them, and both of them are very different. Basically, these 2 units transform to dragons, which is amazing. One unit is way more useful than the others. Basically, they have very low defense, but extremely high attack, and the speed evolves slowly over time. As they drop slow, they can get faster as you level them up. The second one you get, which you have to have the first one to get, is way better, but we'll get into that in the actual main game story. Next up is the Mercenary, which is a basic sword user, very average all around, nothing special, but nothing bad either. And then we get the Paladin, which is a beefed up version of the Cavalier. This is actually a trope that you'll see in Fire Emblem, where they'll give you a very strong unit at the beginning of the game, like this, and that unit actually, because of their slow growth rates, will actually become not as good later on. However, in this game, it's not as much affected, so you can still use your original Paladin, even in the late game, which is very different from other Fire Emblem games. So you can't use Frederick in late game in Fire Emblem Awakening unless he's a partner. Sorry. But yeah, these guys are basically like beefed up Paladins, not Paladins, beefed up Cavaliers, so they're pretty good. Next is the Pegasus Knight. These units are very unique as they can basically go where the hell they want. They have the best mobility in the game, bar none. However, they are extremely fragile, so they aren't the most useful. However, and such you can't really partner up with another unit to fly them around like you can do in later games. So yeah, these units aren't too useful, but you can find definite very uses for them. You gotta use what you have. The pirate unit you only get one of. However, you'll see a lot of these in the enemy units. A pirate unit is basically like the warrior axe wielders, except they can walk on water. So they're very weird in that way, because what the heck? They don't. I guess they swim really good. I don't know. They're incredibly annoying to fight against, and you only get one on your side. So use them to your ability. We have another unique one unit for the class, being the sniper, which is just like the archer, except it can shoot for 2 away. It's nothing really special either. Next up is the thief class. These guys are pretty much useless in this game. They are more useful in later games. They can hit twice in a row, but they have crap damage output. They have okay mobility, and they can take basically no damage. I meant the other way around. But yeah, what are they mostly used for? Well, opening doors and chests, which is pretty useless as there's so many keys in the game, as well as the fact that Marv can open pretty much any chest he wants after Chapter 6. So yeah, these guys, they suck. And our last unit is the Wyvern Rider, which there's only one of. And not pictured here is the Wyvern that this character rides. Wyvern Riders are like the Pegasus Knights, except they are not glass cannons. They are actually kind of tanky, which makes them pretty useful. So it's actually kind of easy to avoid this in the game because it's weird how it's scripted in the level. But make sure you don't mess out on this unit because it's very useful. Now, one of the things you'll notice about the combat in this game compared to other ones is that the weapon triangle does not exist. If you don't know what the weapon triangle is, basically it works like Pokemon. Essentially, certain weapon types are better against others. So sword is good against axe is good against lance, and lance is good against sword. This does not exist in the original Fire Emblem. I guess this makes sense, as there's not as many weapon types in the game. In fact, you're mostly using swords for most of your units, and barely any of them use the axe. So most of the battles are based on the stats of each of the units, which is fine, except it takes away a little bit of the strategy there. The other thing I'd like to talk about gameplay is the combat system. Each of you guys take a turn, and based on the terrain, you'll get a little bit of advantage or disadvantage. Not too heavy in this game, and your characters can counterattack based off their mobility speed. Certain units don't counterattack as much. Characters like Marth will counterattack a lot more than a character that's a knight, per se. And as mentioned before, certain units can't even counterattack at all. Like if you're fighting right next to an archer, the archer won't fight back, and if your archer's from afar, the other one won't fight back, where the one on the standstill. It's pretty basic. And overall, the better the unit is, the more chances it has to attack. Of course, the advantage with the person choosing a fight is that they always get a chance to hit it first. However, of course, depending on the ability, the other unit can dodge, so keep that in mind. Like this enemy unit is attacking the player unit, however, they actually miss, and the player actually gets an advantage, is able to actually take down the enemy unit without taking a single bit of damage due to the high mobility of their character. So you need the opportunity to hit first. Sometimes it won't even work out for you due to the fact that your mobility versus the characters and the luck can go against you. Now I know what you're wondering. Why are we doing this? Why are these guys fighting each other? Well, let's get into the story. The story is about an exiled prince named Marv, whose home kingland of Altea was conquered by, well, bad guys, we'll just say. He's in exile at the islands Atalias, which is a young island kingdom. He has to help repel a pirate invasion along the request of the island's Princess Cadia. Marv, of course, is going to help them out because why not? He's a good guy. He wants to retake everything from these evil pirates. Essentially, all this chaos came from this guy called Dull, who has basically conquered multiple kingdoms in the world, and Prince Marv is going to help unite all these other kingdoms by fighting the pirates and other thieves and conquestors and take back his kingdom along with the other kingdoms that was also taken over by this asshole guy. The first chapter is pretty simple. It's called Marv Embarks, and it's the first chapter of 25 in the game, which doesn't sound like too much because most of these battles take like an hour to complete. It can take a while. This one is pretty simple, though. The units you start out with are Marv, who I already mentioned is a pretty good unit. However, he does get attacked by every enemy in the board, which is kind of sucky. He grows exponentially throughout the game, and he does a lot of great counter hits. And later on, he gets a unique sword to him only called the Falchion, which is later in the game, so we won't talk about it right now. But basically, it's super strong, and it can heal him every turn, which is amazing. Of course, there's Cadia, who is the princess of the island, who's the Pegasus Knight, who also becomes Marv's love interest throughout the expanded universe, though it's not really expanded on in this game, since they don't have a lot of story for a lot of characters, because they think that they could possibly die, so they don't really focus on them past the one chapter introduced, which kind of sucks, but oh well. She is a Pegasus Knight, which, like I said, has a lot of high mobility. So, yeah, you gotta plan her out pretty well, but she can be useful in certain situations. Next is the Cavalier Kane, who is pretty useful. He's all around average starting out, but he does grow exponentially throughout the game, and can be promoted to Paladin. He becomes a pretty strong unit, though he takes a little while to grow. Next is Abel, who is also a Cavalier, and very similar to Kane, except they have slightly different stats. Technically, Abel's easier to grow, however, Kane can give you better results, though they're pretty much even. And yes, their names are Cain and Abel. I don't know why they decided to name the characters off the characters from the Christian Bible or / Judaist Bible, whatever it is. I don't give a crap. But yeah, this apparently became an archetype as a name to Cavaliers, Cain, Abel, and Fire Emblem. I don't know why, but they do. Next up is Drog, who is your knight unit, which is very useful to be early game, though he does slow down a lot during later games. He's pretty strong, but incredibly slow, which sucks in this game, since you really want to get moving around in this game, and having such a slow unit is pretty bad, but he is pretty useful in the early game. Next up is Jagan. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, Jagan. I don't really know how to pronounce these names, honestly, because they're just written down, and they're pretty weird. But yeah, Jagan or Jagan, don't know, probably say Jagan for now. He is a paladin, and he's a pretty useful archetype of the character, which is a very strong one early on, doing great, though he does slow down exponentially as the game goes on. Though, unlike the other future paladin types like him, he actually can be used late in game because there's not much of a difference, really. He's interesting as he actually has some backstory, being a knight from Altea and protecting Prince Marv in their escape, so that's pretty cool. But unfortunately, since if the unit can possibly die, they don't give him a lot of story focus after being introduced in one chapter, which does suck, but hey, he's pretty cool. He's protecting Marv, and he's an old, cool badass. The next unit you have, your Gecko, is Gordon, who's an archer. He's pretty basic. In fact, he gets pretty much outclassed by every archer in the game. He can be promoted to a sniper, but he's not really worth keeping around since you get so many other bow users that this guy kind of sucks. Sorry. So that is all the units you start out with in the first battle map. However, there is ways to get an extra one, but you gotta use the right strategy, which just have Marth go to a certain place in the map, that is. Once you get all the way to the left side of the island, you can go into this house over here, only with Marth. You can visit it, and you can find the guy known as Wyrus? I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry I can't pronounce your name there, dude. W-R-Y-S. Rers. Was. I'm sure someone will tell me how to pronounce it in the comment section down below. But yeah, he's our first bishop and our first recruitable unit, and he looks like Patrick Stewart, which is pretty nice. He wants to offer Marfa a healing hand, and I will gladly accept his offer. He's already being put to good use by healing our units. Anyway, the main thing we're here to do is actually beat the level, and the only way to beat that is by being the boss who's inside of a temple, meaning the guy gets healed every turn, so that kind of sucks. So it means you want to take him out quick. This is Gazak, our first boss, and like every other boss, he's located in a castle, which means he gets healed, like I already mentioned. He's a pirate unit. He's not too strong, but a lot of these other bosses can give you a pain in the ass. This guy isn't too difficult to deal with, but keep in mind that it's going to be a lot harder from here on out. Anyway, once this guy is defeated, we saved the island. But it's not over yet, because we have to have Marth manually go inside the castle, because he's the only one that can visit. Isn't that lovely? With that, we saved King Mustine, I believe it. I don't really know. They don't say the character's name in the game, so I don't really know. Anyway, he will give us recruits for the next chapter, which is pretty useful. So let's go on to chapter 2. The next chapter is called The Pirates of Galdir, which is a lot more island hopping based. There's a lot of different branches to go through in order to get to the main goal, which is the very end, which is all those enemy units. During this chapter, we find that pirates are here again and taking over the village here, and our new recruits are here to help. And of course, we gotta stop the pirates because pirates are bad news. In this chapter, we're giving them a couple of axe wielders, or fighter class, if you will, including Bord. Yeah, his name is Bord, not B-O-R-E-D, but B-O-R-D, which I guess would be called Bord too. This guy is not very useful. He's an axe user, but he gets outclassed heavily by one of the other axe users. He doesn't have that high growth rate. He can use certain weapons, and that's about it. Cord's another fighter you get here, and he's also not very good. In fact, he might be one of the worst in the game. He's not very good at what he does. Mostly because these axe users get outclassed by another axe user you get at the very beginning of the game. Right here. Bars is easily the most useful fighter. You even see in his artwork, he's adding, hey, yeah, he wields 2 axes. He grows pretty fast, he's incredibly strong, he's great at taking out bosses. He's not as useful late game, but he's still very strong and worth having in your team, so go Barst. One of the main units to get here is Agma, the mercenary, who is very useful. He has a lot more backstory in future Fire Emblem games, but here he's just a guy who works for the king previously, and he's got a cool scar, and he warns Marfa pirates. He's a pretty all-around useful guy. He can be upgraded to a hero later on in the game, as well as being all-around good, similar to Marth, but nowhere near as good. He's a guy you might want to stick around with, because, he's all-around a good guy, and he's got your back. One thing to know about this map is that instead of enemies coming from one side, we have enemies coming from two sides. On the left side, over the main area, as well as right on the top of you, which, you got typical pirates and stuff like that. They're always trying to attack you. However, you actually can recruit 2 of these enemies. Holy crap, recruiting enemies? Who would have thought of that? Well, Marv's a cool guy. He will recruit anybody as long as they're willing to switch sides and fight for truth and justice. This one's pretty missable, as you have to have this guy actually come to you. Darius will actually approach Marv. It's like, I don't want to be a pirate anymore. Please let me join you so I can change my ways. And Marv's like, okay. Darius is the only pirate unit you can recruit in the game, and he has a very weird official portrait, which is this. It looks kind of off model compared to the other official artwork for the game or whatever. He isn't that great, because his only really unique ability is the fact he can walk across water, which sounds pretty cool, but due to the fact he doesn't have that great mobility speed, and the reason pirates are annoying to begin with because there's so many of them, so having just one isn't that great. Plus, Barst just outclassed him by a lot. The axe users in this game are not useful, especially without the weapon triangle, so he's really not worth having around. Our next recruiting is another enemy unit. This guy wants to shoot at us because he wants money. He asked for forgiveness from Princess Cadia, so we know what to do with this guy. So we have Cadia talk to him, and he's like, well, I wanna have to fight because my mom needs medicine and I can't afford it, and the pirates are gonna give me money. And she's like, well, I'll give you money. And he's like, okay, I'll join your team then. Castor's the only hunter unit in the game, and he's pretty decent, though he's pretty lackluster later on in the game. He's definitely better than the other archer unit you got right now, so might as well keep using him. The main boss here is Gomer, who's a pirate, and he's nothing too tough here. You just take him out, and once that's done, well, it's done. And that brings us to the next chapter, Chapter 3. This one is called A Brush in the Teeth. I'm not even joking, it's literally called that. And this map, as you can probably tell, is very unique as the fact that it's very mountainous compared to the islands we've gone through in the last couple levels. In the mountains, we find that there is a love story going on between a thief and a healer working for Marth that is a new recruit now, and of course the thief who worked for the other guys decides that he's in love with this girl and he's going to help her escape from these mountainous drains. And she can, I can help move you too, but I don't really use healing items, I just move people. Whatever, who cares. This map really showcases what this game loves to do, which is incredibly tight areas for your unit to go through, and just has ample time for the enemy units to attack you. It's kind of annoying, but it's whatever. Anyway, this guy's thief is Julian. He's one of their new recruits of the game. He's a thief. Thieves aren't very good in this game, so he's not worth having full-time on your team. Lena, on the other hand, who is the cleric class, is much more useful, as she gets a lot of staff weapons that are very useful to have this early in the game. Much better than the other guy, who I cannot pronounce his name. Her move one is pretty useful, getting units very far across the map, seeing as the mobility speed of the unit to get across can be very difficult, especially in a lot of the terrains this game designs, which are usually narrow areas, so having a unit that can just transport very strong units to the boss can be pretty useful at times, though it can be risky. She does get pretty useful ones and has a very high growth rate, so she can be pretty useful. However, she is very vulnerable, so keep that in mind. The biggest problem with this unit is that in order to use these useful items, you have to find the shop and next to manually make the character go to it, which is just incredibly annoying to do, especially after we use the other Fire Emblem games where the shop is in between each of the chapters, but I guess I'm over complaining at this point. In this map, we actually can find another recruitable unit. There's actually quite a lot in this game, actually. This one you gotta use Cadia, who wants to recruit this guy, who seems to be an edgelord, who seems to be sexist too. And Cadia tries to convince him that he's on the wrong side, but he's like, I'm gonna kill you, but he's like, no, I can't, because I'm not sexist, even though I guess I am, I don't know, who cares. Navir, here, who's an edgelord, is a mercenary, and he's all around pretty average, nothing special, nothing bad. He's a good unit to have around. The boss of this level is called Hyman, who actually has a throwing axe. He's a fighter type. Fighter types aren't the most strongest hitting characters in the game, so overall he's not too bad, especially when it comes to attack. He does a bit more defense than I guess other units, but overall these early bosses aren't too hard. They'll get a lot harder later on, but here they're pretty easy. Anyway, the next chapter is Battle in the Lee, I believe that's what it's called, where we get an opportunity to select certain units, because we will reach the requirement. which is only a maximum amount you can use in certain areas, so you gotta make sure you choose wisely. I think you already got a pretty good guide in the characters if you watch this video, so you know which ones to use and which ones are the best ones. It's best to have balance between your fighters because you don't want to have a bunch of axe wielders on the field. Like, come on. In comparison to the previous maps, this map is a lot more open, though there is little areas there to go across. The main area where the boss is, there's a little bridge, basically, and there's a little tournament area too, which is not too important, just get money. There's a little bit of fighters on the top, but overall, nothing too drastic, just a little thief at the bottom too. During this battlefield, you gotta figure out which units are gonna go which way, since there's two options. I think last time, so have to be way more opened up. So you figure out, we're gonna take good care of some of these guys at the top, that'll come down to you, or we can go away to the west side and get the actual boss. Well, in this one, you don't start out with any unique units, you can recruit two more ones. First, using our cleric, Lena, here, we can talk to one of these guys here. You don't have to be her brother, Matthias, I believe that's how you say it. He's like, oh my god, you're my sister? I'll go fight with you then. Anyway, it seems like Matthias is kind of suicidal, and he decides he's rather fight on his sister's side, he's gonna die. Let's hope he doesn't die, though, because we want to use him on our team. Matthias isn't very good, or Matthias, I don't know how you say his name. He's all average, but kind of below, and he struggles against heavier enemies, making him not too useful, since you already have a lot of Cavaliers at this point, so no really reason to bother with him. If you visit this house in the northern part, near the end of the level, you'll find this mage kid called Merrick, who's been searching for Marv. And Marv's like, you're pretty good at magic, so come join my team. And Merrick's like, alright, I love you, Marv, of course I'll help your team fight these evil guys. Merrick is kind of a pretty glass cannon, though he's not the best one in the game. He is a mage, so he uses tomes, which are very useful weapons to use in the game, but he does get killed pretty easily. So keep that in mind. There are better replacements for him, but having one this early on is always nice. The boss of this level is Bent Heon, who's a Cavalier. He's a little tanky, but overall nothing too crazy. Once you beat the guy, you'll be told by the villagers that Prince Hardon is fighting a war to the south. You should help him out. So that's what we're going to do in the next chapter. Chapter 5, otherwise known as Champions of Auralis, is kind of a combination of the previous maps. Mountainous areas that are hard to overcome, as well as bridges indicating 3 different islands here. And yeah, it could be a little more tricky, especially since there's a lot more archers here, which is something you weren't used to in the previous levels. That's something you gotta get used to. Anyway, during this battle, we find the prince and princess here who are fighting an all-out war here. Hardon, that's his name, and then the princess, I forget her name. We'll figure it out pretty soon. They're ready to fight to bring back the fortress with the help of Marth, and Hardon's a pretty cool guy, and let's get into him actually. Not only is Hardon incredibly cool, he's also Cavalier, one of the best classes in the game, and he's easily one of the strongest with high base stats and basically no faults at all. So he's basically going to be a mainstay for you because he's so good. With Prince Hardon, we got Wolf, who is a horseman, which is the bow horse users. Pretty average, nothing special, but if you want him, you can use him. Unlike Wolf, Sedgur, another horseman, is just crap. He sucks, alright? He's just worse version of Wolf, who is already just an average unit, so never use this guy. Roshea is another Cavalier, this is a dude, by the way. He has pink hair, don't mind him. He's all around average. Good, not great. I don't know why, but Hardon is a really great character, with great stats and everything like that, but his 4 horsemen are terrible, including Violin, who's a Cavalier, who has worse stats than the ones of the Cavaliers you already have in the game. So what's the point of this guy? I don't know. His rough rate sucks, everything about him sucks. Screw you, Violin. On this map, you'll actually find another recruitable enemy. This guy ought to approach you. He's Wendell. He is one of the best characters in the game, because even though he's an old man, he's extremely powerful. Wendell's bishop, meaning he used tomes as well as staffs, which is pretty broken. Other than the fact that you have to go to the shops and trade constantly, which can be really annoying, so it's really be done at the very end of the map where you have to grind it out and move the characters around. Very annoying. But other than that, he has very strong attack and he's very good at the game. So yeah, highly recommend getting this guy. One of the more annoying aspects about this area is not only are there a lot of more annoying enemies, but you have to fight at night, which are very annoying to fight due to the fact they have such high defense. I mean, you gotta find the right guy to use it, though if you use your little mage guys, you can take a lot of damage off these guys. Though, like I said, only certain ones can attack them. There's 2 in the castle, very annoying, you gotta time it out perfectly. Basically, this game requires a lot of strategy, more so than any other Fire Emblem game, and a lot of guides, because this game does not hold your hand at all. But some people might prefer that. Finally, you get to meet the king, who looks very similar to the previous king you meet, but trust me, he's a different king. Tells her the princess is in another castle. Well, she fled. He's like, she's going to wait for you in the next castle. The next area is called Fire Emblem. That's the title of the game. This is a castle you gotta siege. In this level, you have to siege a castle. Here, you can discover using keys, as well as using thieves. You can go open certain areas and recruit certain things, as well as rob treasure and trade amongst your companions. Basically, the guy here does not want you sieging his castle. He's mad, and he's going to have his units attack you. And yeah, that's pretty unique. The only thing that's really a difference between the castle and the outside world is really nothing. The pillars in there technically act as forest tiles, and other than that, there's nothing really special. Other than the boss fight of this level, there's nothing really too difficult about this one, since there's none of the enemies here are really that strong, and by this point you should have a pretty capable army here. So this siege is actually pretty easy to do. There is a new unit to recruit here, which you have to free from the bars of a cell, which is Rickard. Rickard! Yeah, very interesting name. He's a thief, so he sucks. The main boss here, Emrys, is a general type who is pretty strong, that is, except for magic users. And that's why magic users are so good in this game, and they can pretty much destroy him. Without the magic users, though, you're going to struggle very hard, so keep that in mind. And with his defeat, you actually get the Master Key, which is a very useful item to get, because you can unlock any door with that, if an infinite amount of time, which is pretty cool. After you defeat the main boss, you bring Marth to the throne, where you get to meet Princess Nina, who tells Marth about the Fire Emblem. The Fire Emblem is a pretty neat shield that is given to Marth, and it was apparently whoever gets it will be destined to save the world. And that's all we get really out of this first game for the Fire Emblem. Yes, that's the Fire Emblem. That's what it looks like. Now you know what it is. You thought that Fire Emblem was a fun name? No, it's actually an item in the game. Now you know. Next level is pretty unique. It's the Link Hadif, I believe I said that right, Gauntlet. A narrow map where you have to go southbound in order to fight a bickering army. Basically, the general and the princess have differing views in battle, and halfway through the battle, the princess on her wyvern rider will just leave. And yeah, that's about it. It's kind of funny. And I thought at first, like, oh, did I miss a recruitment option because she just leaves? But no, you can't recruit her, at least during this battle. So yeah, that's kind of funny. This map can be a little annoying if you don't know what you're doing, much like most of the game. However, if you have the right amount of units, but you're gonna need a guide from this game, to be honest, because if you miss any of these optional units, you will have a terrible time. That's all I'm gonna say. If you go to the side village on the side, you can recruit Bantu, who is a Mantike, who is a very unique entity in the game with the unique abilities. Of course, he's not that great though, but you need him if you want to get the other Mantike layer in the game. So this optional one leads to a better optional fighter, who ironically is way more iconic than this weird green guy in a cloak. Heavy hitter, incredibly slow, which is not great, especially with slow growth speed. The boss is Herman, who's another general here who you have to defeat, and the magic users are pretty good against him, as always. We do get some lore once we beat this. Some guy tells us a story of Mantikes, who are dragons who disguise themselves as humans. We actually have one on our team now, so that's nice to know. He talks about how an evil dragon had conquered and destroyed most of it, so that kind of sucks. He also tells us about how the evil dragon was slain by a sword of light called the Falchion, and that a hero is of greatness can defeat an evil dragon. And he's like, you probably can do it, but you gotta go save Altia first. The next chapter of Port Warren is an incredibly annoying map due to this mountainous terrain, very narrow pathways, and very annoying enemy types, and the introduction of respawning enemies, which are insane in this map. Every little castle unit there can respawn enemies, and it's very annoying, especially if you're trying to do trading and stuff like that. Though the main boss is unprotected, so if you use a Great Warp, you could probably defeat this pretty quickly. However, it is very annoying still. We start off this round by actually getting 2 brand new mercenary classes that apparently Marth hired on the side. That includes Caesar, who's the weakest mercenary in the game. Nothing great about him. Mercenaries aren't bad, but it's not worth having a weak one on your team. Rad, on the other hand, is pretty rad. He's a mercenary that starts off pretty slow, but he has really high growth rates, meaning every level up means he gets more and more crazy stats, making him pretty great later on, though he does start off pretty slow. Next up is Roger, who's recruitable in this map, and you have to have Cadia. Cadia will actually flirt this guy, and he'll switch sides because I I don't know, he has small dick energy. Anyway, this guy's not very good. The Knight class is very temperamental anyway, very useful early on, but its slow movement speed sucks, and he's just worse than the one you already have, so Roger's not worth it. Sorry, Roger, you're a simp. Boss of this area is Grust, who is a Cavalier, though Marv can take him down by just himself, so he's obviously not that great. It's hard, this part is just getting to him. Other than that, yeah, it's pretty easy. The next level, the Corinthian Dragon, is one of the most infuriating levels in the entire game. This level is made up of entirely small islands, and the best way is unlocking the door. But if you don't do that, you're going to go for an awful gauntlet of instantly respawning pirates throwing constant battle axes at you. Just incredibly annoying. And the final boss of this area is extremely difficult. The only recruitable one in this level is George with a J. George. I don't know how that pronounced differently. Anyway, he's a sniper, which is alright off the bat. Archers in this game aren't very good, and this tome users is way better version of them. Even in later Fire Emblem games, it's kind of true. This guy he hits a little good, but yeah, archers are just not that great of a unit to have. So yeah, he's okay, but yeah. The boss of this area is Manu, who's a man-type, the first one we get to fight against, and it is pretty crazy to see at first hand, seeing this guy transform into a giant dragon. Obviously, your mage users are going to be the best one to fight against this guy, since he cannot attack you close range, and of course, like I said, these mage attacks are really great. The other tomes are amazing. Other than that, this guy will just tank every other hit if you don't use these tome attacks, so yeah. Other than that, he's pretty easy. Once you finally get to the castle, you're revealed that the princess has been kidnapped by Doll, and you gotta save her in order to plan the next attack. Chapter 10, otherwise known as Princess Minerva, the Princess Maria has been kidnapped, and Marv decides to help, even though previously her sister, Princess Minerva, attacked them. Don't worry, Marv's gonna recruit both of them, because he's a good guy, like I said. Despite the fact you're supposed to be rescuing her, she actually ends up being an enemy unit. Though if she talks to Marv, she'll join your team. She is a cleric type, which is alright, but we already have that type. And she can be promoted to use tomes, but that means that she has to go fight enemies, which means she could easily get killed. This unit isn't very useful because of that. So yeah, even upgrading the unit and promoting it, just not worth it because of the fact that it's basically like Magikarp training. Not worth it, plus we already have Nina for this same requirement. Sorry, Maria. Next is Minerva, our only Wyvern rider in the game, and yeah, she ditched us the other thing, tried not to fight us. Now we get to recruit her, and Wyvern riders are pretty good, and since she's the only one in the game, you're probably going to want to use her. I mean, look at that beast. You wouldn't want that on your team, wouldn't you? The main boss is Zeruf, who is a basic guy, and by this point you can have really great items like 11 Sword, which allows Marv and other sword fighters to just hit enemies from a distance by shooting lightning out his sword, so yeah, nothing is going to beat that, so he dies pretty easily. Once you siege the castle, you'll be reunited with another princess, who you weren't saving, she just happens to be there. She tells you that there's a daughter of a famous warrior who's been gone missing, and she's like, Marv, can you help me find her? And Marv's like, sure, whatever, I'll do whatever you guys tell me to do, because that's my character. The next chapter is Canardo Market. This one is also a narrow passageway, but what you expect from the first Fire Emblem game. This one is unique as there's a castle area, which you have to siege, obviously, as well as a market area full of thieves. Well, not thieves, just swordsmen. So, yeah, it's very interesting, and the story for this one is kind of bizarre. Hope you enjoyed this video, as it did take a long time to make, so I would appreciate a like, a subscribe, or anything else you might want to do. I'm not sure if I will be doing more. Maybe the next videos in this series will probably be a lot shorter, and it won't be covering as much. But hey, we'll see. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. This area is apparently home to the Princess Nina character, who we've seen multiple times, and apparently her whole family was murdered and hanged on the walls as an example, which is a pretty dark detail, but oh well, it's an 8-bit game, so you won't see anything. Well, you do hear about it, and that is why it's dark. Being a new chapter, of course, we got new units, including Lynn, who is another mage unit. Mage units are very useful in the game, even though Lynn doesn't have the greatest stats, because tomes are infected by the user's attack at all, meaning that she could still be pretty useful. Like I said, not that great, especially since we already have some pretty good units, but if you want to recruit another mage, here you go, right, just go to the village. The next unit you can recruit here is a ballista known as Jake. Yeah, Jake. A ballista, I believe it's what you call it, I'm not good at pronunciation, don't mind me, is a very unique unit, as they can hit pretty hard. However, their accuracy is terrible. They can hit far and hard, but their accuracy and movement speed is pretty bad. So this guy is one of those if you need him kind of situations, because those setbacks are pretty heavy. Anyway, one of the useless things about this map is once you clear out the enemies in the area to the right, you get a nice shopping area where a bunch of your units can just easily browse and shop for things that you might need, which is very useful, seeing as, you know, it's hard to get go to the shops at some levels. So it's nice to have an easy one in this level. Anyway, the next chapter is the Ageless Palace. Marth and his crew are now sieging on the Palace of Arcade, whatever it is. I cannot pronounce stuff, I'm bad. This one's unique, as we also have to save a couple units we get from the start. You can see them in the top left corner. They are worried about getting executed, but don't worry, Marth and his crew are going to save them. We get this, 5 brand new units, just right off the get-go. Whippy. These units include Midia, who's a paladin. She's all-around pretty average, similar to Hardon, but nowhere near as good. Definitely worth keeping near the end game of the game. Next is the Bishop, Boa. I believe that's how you say it. He is extremely similar to Wendell units, and depending on where you are in the game, Wendell might already surpass this guy. Though he's still pretty good, since the Bishop's one of the best classes in the game. So you want an extra one? Well, here you go. Next up is Tomas, who's an archer. While he can be promoted pretty quickly to a sniper, he is pretty crap because archers aren't very good in this game, so it's not even worth having him at this point in the game. Just toss him to the side. Next up is the knight Masalan, who is one of the worst units in the game. I keep saying that, but this guy is just a terrible knight. He comes with another knight, alright, who's better than him, so that already makes him look bad, but since the 2 knights you already have, he just sucks. Knights already have crippling slowness, and this guy only has one good stat, which is luck. So, yeah, not the best stat to have to be your only good stat. Honestly, Mr. Clean over here, you're not very good. On the other hand, we have Dolph, who is technically the best knight in the game. The knight class isn't particularly that useful during this point in the game, as your other units at this point will have better defense. They won't really need as much guard. But he does have the best stat line of all the knights, so if you want to keep a knight, here's your best one, Dolph, the green guy. Don't go with the red one. This chapter isn't too different from the other castles we sieged before. A lot of different hidden corridors, pillars that you can hide behind to avoid certain attacks, and a lot of doors and chests to find and open up. So nothing too special here. The main owner of this castle is this guy who's really pissed off at you for daring to impose against the Dol Empire. This is Vazian, who is a bishop, and bishops are very strong in the game, so you need to play it just right in order to kill him. But, you know, if you get the right units, it shouldn't be too hard. Once we finally siege the castle, we finally return Princess Nia to her rightful castle. She's very happy and gives Marth a new weapon, a Parthia bow, which is considered the best bow in the game. Isn't that cool? In the next chapter, the Wooded Cavalry, Marth and his team decide they're going to go back and finally free his old kingdom of Altea after saving the other kingdoms. And our first glance of that is going through this giant wooded area, which is pretty interesting as we have 3 different pathways we can go in order to go past it. There's a lot of archers in this map, because I guess archers live in the woods. I don't know whether that's a stereotype, but it just is. So, yeah, if you have some guys who can hit those range guys, it shouldn't be too bad. If you visit the village in the forest, you get a new unit known as Beck, who's like another ballistician, one of the two. And he's actually pretty useful, as ballisticians actually hit hard against other ballisticians, so it's nice in just this one level here. So, yeah, might as well use him for the level you got him in. Ballisticians, like I said, are very weird units because of the way they have weird hit units. They can hit hard, but they hit rarely. So it's one of those things where you gotta be careful with them. But if you find out a good use for them, they might be a good member of your team. My next recruitable unit here is Astrom, I believe Astrom, something like that. He's actually an enemy unit, and you can recruit him using Midia, which you got in the last campaign. Apparently, he was forced to fight after they kidnapped his love, Midia, and when he had to make her talk to him, he's like, "Oh, you're alive? Well, I'll help fight for you then." He's actually a pretty good unit. He's a hero unit. Hero units are pretty good in this game. He has pretty high stats other than luck, but luck's not the most important stat in the game. So, yeah, he's pretty useful to have, and even though you probably already have a bunch of other heroes, it wouldn't hurt to have another one. Due to how many ranged enemies there are in this area, it's nice to have 11 sword on your sword fighters that can use it, especially on Marth, because this thing's already a really great weapon. 11 swords was good in Awakening, but here it's fucking broken, as you clearly can see. The next chapter is the Land of Sorrow, as we're sieging on the castles of Altea, trying to kill King Joel, who actually killed Marv's father, who was the last wielder of the Falchion, which is Marv is looking for in order to avenge his kingdom. So that's your main goal of this one. As you can see, we have to go to an island and fight off a bunch of archers as well as a lot of knights. Nothing we haven't seen too far yet, so you should be prepared to do it. Though it is a pretty big map and a lot of different corridors and a lot of different alternate pathways to take, so make sure you take the best one. Of the recruitable units, we have 2 Pegasus Knights, Katria, who we actually met before in some text dialogue before, who is now being recruited by the enemy, though her and the other Pegasus Knights they aren't really into that, and as soon as they see Marth, they will immediately join your side. Instead of having more Pegasus Knights, at this point we only had Katia from Reruns the whole entire journey. She actually has really good stats, however, unfortunately she starts at level 1, meaning that you have to level her up, and this is kind of late game, so it's really up to your investment, and she can be promoted to a Wyvern Rider, which is pretty good. And the other one you get is Palia, who also has the same recruitment options, and is also a Pegasus Knight. She's pretty similar to the other Pegasus Knights, so it's really up to you if you want to have 2 new Pegasus Knights on your team, or not. The interesting thing about these 2 characters is that both of them will reappear in this next Fire Emblem Gaiden, which the only reason I'm mentioning that because they're the only 2 characters that I'm aware of that appear in that game, because Fire Emblem is unique for each game in the series. Some of them don't have recurring characters, some of them are sequels. So yeah, that's a fun tidbit for you all. Once you complete the level, you'll find that the Blade of Light Falchion is not there, and that Gernarf must have taken it to Kaladining, as he says right there. And Marv's really sad, but he's like, oh, I don't want to go on the side quest, but I guess I have to because I need this blade. Fuck. The next chapter is the Oasis of Magic. This level does not feature any new recruitable units, and just a big open battlefield full of empty desert. There is a little island in between all this stuff, and a little chest area. You're mostly just going to be battling against the enemies here, which are all mostly magic users. You have to be pretty careful on this map, as magic users are pretty tough in this game, as you already know that your units are already the best units because they use magic. Because why not? It was just like magic. Marv actually fails to kill the guy here, and it makes him mad, and he runs away, as a sage contacts him about all he needs to do, as Gernarf wants to betray Dahl and use dark magic and stuff like that. And he tells him if you go this way, you can get a tome to help counteract that. The next chapter is the Battle for Altea, which is a chapter where we actually enter Altea. Apparently we weren't in it before, but now we are. And here's what Altea looks like. It's a weird clusterfuck of islands. Like, geez Louise, what the hell's wrong with your kingdom, Marv? Why is the top left island just a perfect square and everything else just oddly shaped? Who knows? Why is the bottom part look like that? The bottom left, what's that little weird, like, snake going on there? Who knows? Anyway, there's a crap ton of enemies, as you can clearly see in the center, and there's a shop area, of course, and all this other crap going on, and respawning enemies is crazy. There's 3 recruitable units in this game, however, you can only recruit 2 at a total, because 2 of them, Aaron and Samson, don't like each other. They hate each other. So if you go to the Western Village, you can recruit Aaron. You have to choose to recruit him, and if you choose to recruit him, you cannot recruit Samson. Aaron is a Cavalier, which is a pretty good... No, not Cavalier, Paladin, unless a Cavalier. You know what I mean. Anyway, so he's pretty good. He doesn't grow that fast, and since we're near the end game now, it's just, like, not really worth that much, but his good movement speed, he's around a pretty good unit. So it's really up to you if you'd rather have a nice, more movement speed unit that's strong, but doesn't grow that much, over the other unit, which is Samson, the hero unit, who doesn't have as much unit, but has pretty strong strength and is good right from the get-go. So it's really up to you. Do you want to grow your unit a little bit more of a good movement speed, or you want to have one that's already strong from the get-go, but doesn't have as much movement speed? That's really up to you, though Samson definitely seems like a more interesting unit in that case, to me. The last unit you can recruit here is Zane, the freelancer, who is being kidnapped by the Dahl army because he can shapeshift. Of course, he's the only freelancer in the game, and freelancers are very interesting, even though they can't copy items of the units, they can copy exact stats, which can be pretty useful. As long as you have the right equipment on him, he's definitely a good member to have on your team. He's a Ditto, but more useful than Ditto, because you copy stats. This level can be pretty tricky, but once you're done, it is great. Everyone celebrates, including Princess Nina, except for Marv, who's like, hey, the castle still needs to be besieged, we can't just stop here. So that's our next stop. The next chapter is Star and Saviors in our castle siege. This is one of Marv's castles, where he learns to find that his mother is also dead, and that his sister is in another castle. They may make him mournful, but he does capture the castle. It's a castle level, we've seen these before. Typical units here that you see in typical castles, nothing too new or unique. Tight corridors, different passageways that requires keys and stuff like that. and a whole chest room full of stuff. And there's even an exterior, which, if you want to go to a shop, I guess. But other than that, you're mostly sieging a castle. With this area, we finally are getting near the end of the Fire Emblem game, or at least we would if there wasn't like a lot more chapters left. This has 25 chapters, keep that in mind. I feel like I've been here forever, but oh well, let's keep going. The next chapter, which is the Sable Order, follows Marth's team going across 3 weird-looking shaped islands, which, yeah, that's fine. There's a lot of empty space over there to the left side there, don't you think? Anyway, this is the first part of after you save Altea, which we did in the last chapter, and we're trying to find our missing pieces so we can finally stop Dole, which is including some MacGuffins that Marth needs. We have one new recruitable unit, being Est, who is another Pegasus Knight, and who also appears in Shadow of Versailles, or whatever it is. Fire Emblem game, I don't know why I said Shadow of Versailles, that's not even the right thing. Who knows? Another Pegasus Knight with incredibly low stats, but extremely high growths, so usually up to you if you really want this on your team. If you really want this on your team. I know I said this, like this is a disgusting monster. Anyway, the next chapter is finally where we can get our 2 MacGuffins, which is the Light Spear and the Something Sphere. They're just magical objects. Anyway, guarding this is a giant castle, which is very vertical. As you can clearly see, it looks like we're going up a 5-story tower here. And it's being guarded by the Manakete princess, who's been brainwashed by Gnarf, Tiki, who will recruit right now. Tiki is the only recruitable boss in the entire game, and she's one of the most